What is it to be a fighter in this arena? How many of you have said to yourself, I want to be a champion? How many of you have said it more than once? And how many of you have been saying that every moment of every day as long as you can remember? That is what it means to be a fighter in this arena. It doesn't take a smart man, but it does take a determined one to decide that their life has not begun to reach its true potential. These fighters are the men who have been battling themselves every day of their lives, never satisfied with how much they have grown, only determined to find out how far they can travel. Anyone who makes it through these hallowed doors does not carry the deadly scars of battle with them. Well, I pray one day this may change. Currently, there is not a single member of this league who does not have a story of significant, life-changing, catastrophic, mental and emotional damage. For those of you who do not make it out of that struggle, I pray that God has mercy on your poor and damaged souls, because we're still figuring out how to teach the lessons of empathy and perspective by counterexample without destroying the sanity of half and nearly killing it in the other half. Tragedy is a path to self-improvement. It is a hard path, but it does not always remain so. Demons are eventually slain. Pain is removed. And one day the sufficiently self-improved man is one who has realized that choosing happiness is always an option and need not change anything other than the inner view of how their life is a thing of wonder, regardless of their specific whims and desires. When one becomes strong enough to overcome their pain, they are overcome with a desire to seek out their true limitations. Like hungry wolves, loose in the night they prowl, looking for people and ideas they haven't heard before, in an attempt to sharpen and expand their understanding of themselves. But there is no honor in that. The ego is a cruel thing. When one is no longer held back by it, they find it difficult to harm someone who still is. They feel empathy and connection, remembering the time when their own heart was made of glass and they had to run around like mad men to keep flying debris from knocking into it and shattering it all with a single touch. So the student can no longer train as he used to. He seeks out others like himself, finding anyone who knows more about themselves than they do, even if it's one tiny sliver. And such a thing is useful and better than nothing, but it is time-consuming. One who is possessed by their ego and one who is in control of it appear the same and must be sorted out one at a time. By God, any of you realize that every one of us is going to die, and there isn't enough time to be putting off things like this. One at a time isn't fast enough. It's not good enough. I don't want to die when I'm finally starting to figure all of this out. So too do they realize this. There is only one way to accelerate the process. There must be combat, and there must be death. Both of them realize that in a conversation, combat is not meant to take the form of two men entering, one man leaves. In the realm of ideas, the best outcome is two men enter and two men die, and they're reborn as new men with better and more balanced ideas, neither of them giving up any part of themselves, nor choosing to keep anything against their own will, but looking for value in that which they have not yet begun to understand, and being courageous enough to take it. It is my goal that one day I will fill this league with fighters who have not had the experience, the personal hell of self-discovery the hard way. And instead of sitting on the backs of what we do here today, where we decide it doesn't need to take a personal tragedy for 2 or 3 or 10 or 2,000 or all of us to say competing to learn more about ourselves is a good idea. We can have the growth. We can have the happiness and the change and the courage and the death of every part of us that is weak and pathetic. And all it takes is for them to believe they can do better and sharpen themselves against each other. They fight, you decide. Which brings me to tonight's contest. In one corner of the universe, debating within the sacred halls of the Facebook Messenger group, the Professional Mental Street Fighters League. Within those confines, we have set stage for combat where 2 men will type their opinions back to one another as they listen to me weigh upon their every response, evaluating it critically. With me in their ear and their words on the page, who will provide more value? They fight. You decide. In one corner of the universe, we have our first titan of self-improvement and self-discovery. He is a man of balance and nature who sees wisdom in simple things that are often overlooked and takes full advantage of that weakness in others. He is a student who does his learning outside of the classroom, citing nature, the fantasy metaphors from Terry Goodkind's Sword of Truth series, and the very armed forces of the United States as well. He is just as likely to stir the pot as he is to get inside in it and stew with you. First name Bradley. And he is the Black Sheet, the reluctant sage. Will he be able to bring the calm center he carries with him into the world onto the stage of competition? Will he be able to remain focused on the goal of pursuing high truth instead of preserving his own peaceful disposition? He fights. You decide. Bradley, declare your intent to participate. Are you ready? And I will ask him in type as well, because I fear he may be struggling, as many of our Titans have, with the technology of their first match. The intent to participate has been asked of you, Bradley. Will you fight tonight? In the other corner of the universe, we have a seasoned veteran who hopefully will help his companion fix his technical difficulties by the end of this prelude. It will be quite the challenge of his troubleshooting abilities. Michael, do you have the ability to talk Bradley through this in just a few short minutes? We have a seasoned veteran whose very presence makes the world a more stable and orderly place. His intellectual influences include history, sociology, and computer science. He is one of many Michaels, but in this league, and in this stage, in this moment, more than any other moment before it, he is the one, the only, Miggity Mike. Will the difference in personalities be enough to trip Michael up? Will the intellectual barrier prevent Michael from explaining his position clearly enough so that a conversation can even be had? Will he be able to stretch his mind enough to the challenge of his position? It might make sense in the limited context created, but to limit conversation for purposes of showing an uncommon limitation. The places of wisdom are not found in a book or on a computer screen. He fights. You decide. It's time for the rules of tonight's contest. Michael, declare your intent to participate. Bradley, if you can hear me, mute your microphone. I have called you specifically so you can chat. Let me know if you can hear me. Both fighters are engaged in a free-for-all, no-holds-barred battle of wits with the single driving passion to convince the other person they have a deeper understanding of the truth than their opponent. At the end of the match, the fighters will be judged on the following criteria: how well they understand their own position by explaining it clearly. How well do they understand the position of their opponent when the opponent is being clear? How much does their own ego stop them from trying to find the better answer? This is not about being right or wrong, because this stage can only be reached by those who realize no one has all the answers. And when no one has all the right answers, all that is left is a better answer. They fight, you decide. That is the competition here, and that is the metric for victory. Tonight's match is set for a time limit of 30 minutes. The fighters are limited only by how much they can effectively communicate their position before the time runs out. How effectively can they spot a weakness in their opponent's arguments? Who will drive the discussion more until both of them reach agreement? Will agreement be made before time runs out? Do either of them put their own ego ahead of the truth? They fight. You decide. The topic for tonight's event is: what is a good question? 3, 2, 1, fight! Bradley is new to this hall, but both of them are typing already. It seems, whoa, my goodness, Michael comes out of the gate, having learned from his earlier stumbles. Yes, it is Michael who says the question itself is a good question. Well, thank you very much, but brown-nosing and glad-handing will not get you very far in this arena. Yes, unless you are attempting to psychologically piggyback off the goodwill that I have made for you, in which case it is a brilliant strategy, sir. The question itself is a good question, but why? And Bradley actually takes the lead because Michael is too busy patting the question on the back without expanding on it. Bradley will be read first. A good question has 2 qualities. And yes, he's setting the stage. A little bit slow on the beginning, but this is his first match and he's already taken the initiative. Well done, Bradley. He says 2 qualities exist. What will Michael have to say? And Michael, responding second but very narrowly, not able to read what Bradley had said before him, says, I think what makes a good question yields not only a good answer, but also yields more questions. So what Michael is doing here is he is making reality around this question. 2 people cannot discuss a topic unless both of them know what they're talking about. And often this is overlooked in common conversation. It is why the arguments do not go well, but neither of our titans here this evening make that mistake. They invest the time to find out what it is they're talking about first, before they try to forge in a direction without their other in tow. And Bradley says it serves a purpose and is understood. Yes, Bradley, it serves a purpose and is understood. It can serve the purpose of creating an understanding or new knowledge, and Bradley is doing quite well. He has defined a question, given it intent, and created our ability to evaluate whether it is good or not. And Michael fires back. He says he agrees with the latter, meaning he does not directly agree to the first. A good question must be fully understood. Does a good question have to serve a purpose? That's a good question, Michael. And how do I know it's a good question? Because it serves the purpose of letting me know what a good question is. Now, could we have a question that does not have a purpose and still be useful? Well, you decide. I don't know. Bradley fires back. Does that question serve you a purpose? My goodness, what a terrific defense by Bradley. Yes, how do you answer that question unless you don't know, when you don't have the answer? You turn it around and say, do not ask of me what you cannot provide yourself. And Bradley does that wonderfully. Michael must answer and says, let's explore that. What is the purpose of a question? So Bradley has taken the conversation and firmly rooted it in the most simple. By asking Michael directly what he means, he uses empathy to better understand his opponent's position. Michael says, let's explore that. What is the purpose of a question? The purpose is whether to teach or to learn. An interesting way to describe it. To teach or to learn, is that the only function of a question? And Michael is attempting to fence in the reality here by asking Bradley what limitations his theory has. Do all questions do either of these things? He is testing to see if not one example can be found where this is not true, because all it takes is one when the answer is all. Bradley is in a difficult position unless he has the perfect answer. And he might. You decide. Michael is looking for the limits of a good question. But how can one define such a thing? That is their job tonight. How would you define a good question? Is a question something that helps your life improve? Is a question something that teaches you? What is a question supposed to do? And Bradley says there are exceptions to every rule, and he's sure there is. Which is a useful thing to say when one is admitting that there exist unknown unknowns, things a man does not know that they don't know. When that argument is used, ignorance can be claimed honestly, but not practically, which is what Bradley follows up with. But a good foundation to start from is knowledge or ignorance. Yes, it doesn't matter where you are on the spectrum if you never attempt to move up or down. Understanding more and understanding less, none of that matters if one does not attempt to understand it all. He says, given the choices, knowledge or ignorance, take your pick. Either one will suit you just fine. So Michael says, what else can a question serve a purpose other than to teach or to learn? Perhaps rhetorical. Wouldn't that be making an indirect point or lesson? So yes, Michael is trying to bind this to teaching and learning. Is he correct? Do questions limit themselves to teaching and learning? Bradley says indirect teaching or learning. Yes, what is it? What is it to teach one who does not know something they do not know? Something they desperately wish to learn, something they don't understand when it is first shown to them. Is it proper form to wrap a knowledge in a riddle that they must unravel first to ingest the teaching that is holding them back? How much do trickery play a part in a good question? Is a good question a hard question? Or is it an easy one? You decide. Michael says, good, I like that. It's broad enough to account for all types, yet limited enough to define. So Michael is saying that Bradley has reached and defined an acceptable plane of conversation for this topic. They have agreed on the battlefield which they move, and there's 23 minutes left. That is fast for this arena. Is it the experience of Michael showing through, pulling Bradley along? Or is Bradley getting to the heart of the matter much more quickly than some of our more long-winded and less organized fighters? Bradley's strength is the reduction to the simple. He is 6 minutes ahead of schedule with Michael when it comes to determining a basis for conversation. How much will this pay dividends at the later half of the conversation when real truth is finally starting to emerge at the boundaries of everyone's understanding? How much more would they be able to find because of this unique dichotomy that allows them to advance their discussion quickly? Bradley says, is a rhetorical question a good question if the answers are already known? Oh my God, he asks if a rhetorical question is a good question if the answers are already known. In the form of a rhetorical question. What a beautiful thing. He shows his point while making it plainly. And Michael misses the point. He says, isn't the point of a rhetorical question to call attention to that which is already known? He didn't even see it. Oh, Michael, you got hit fat in the face with that one. Yes, you were a step behind, but that's okay. I was entertained by it. Every pie needs to be hit someone in the face. And Michael, thank you for taking that pie. It made me happy. Michael says, isn't the point of a rhetorical question to call attention to that which is already known? And Bradley says, to create an understanding in the person you asked for. You're still teaching, aren't you? I shouldn't have done that. I wasn't in control. Michael says, perhaps I am. This is fun. Let's continue to explore this. You said 2 qualities. Could there be more? They've reached common ground. Yes, look at that. He's still teaching. Bradley accuses Michael of teaching, which is another way of saying that Michael is effectively using empathy to make his position understood because Bradley is learning from it. That is incredible. Bradley is sucking this up like a sponge. How fast will he absorb Michael's techniques before they are used against him? Michael says, I want more. I want to be encouraged. This competition is not competitive enough. You've said 2 qualities. We've done that well. 21 minutes remain. Can you do more? And Bradley says, the more I think, the less I can think of. Even if you ask yourself, it's to push your understanding, to teach yourself. Michael says the main point of a question is to seek an answer. Yes, Michael uses my finishing move. The yes with the question mark, and it is effective. Bradley says yes, using a different form of my finishing move, but it's not so effective when it's used in response. But the point is they've reached common ground. And with common ground comes new evolution. How will they explore this plane of thought that they've landed on? They say that questions exist to increase your understanding. That means that certain types of questions now can be ruled out as dishonest, can't they? A question in sheep's clothing would be a question in statement's clothing? No, that's wrong. That's the opposite of what I wanted. A statement wearing the mask of a question is an ugly thing indeed by their definition, isn't it? Because that statement is not a call to understanding, nor is it a call to empathy, or is it a call to elevation. It is a call to say, you need to tell me that I'm right immediately or I will start to get upset. And that is not be a good thing. You wouldn't like me when I'm upset. Well, you know what makes me upset? And if we're going by who is the most upset, I have a problem with you being upset that you cannot be right and learn at the same time. So I win, if that is the metric you wish to be judged by, but it is not. Live by the sword and die by the sword, and I will die by the sword of empathy. I will understand you and help you understand yourself. This is the way. And this is what our 2 fighters are doing. 19 minutes remain. Michael says, and if the question yields an answer, it's by definition good. And what if it yields more questions? Well, it might be better. Who's to say? You decide. Would you rather have 1 good question and 1 good answer, or 1 good question and 2 good questions? One could say that 2 good questions is the best answer. Michael recorrects himself and says, good may be a poor term. He says successful. So now he is bringing into the conversation the success or failure of a question. Bradley says a question has to have an answer to be good. He asks a question, asking for an answer, assuming that Michael will see it good. And Michael says, see prior reply, changing it from good to successful. Oh, Bradley leapt on his term. And Michael corrected it preemptively, avoiding any sort of ego damage that was unnecessary. Bradley says if a question yields questions, it has taught you questions. If it yields anything, it has taught us something, even if it's a rediscovery. And Michael says, good, I like that part, so questions might be more or less powerful. They exist on a spectrum, Michael says. Some of them are more useful than others. If one is judging by how much one is taught, does that mean it takes the right question, put in the right way, met in the right context, meeting us at the right frame of mind at the right time of day in the perfect disposition that could unlock everything we are missing if we just keep looking hard enough? Keep looking hard enough. You can't miss it if you look hard enough. Your mind is pointing everywhere. Anything you are interested in is the answer. Are you interested in this? You decide. And Michael, having agreed with that, has taken Bradley's wisdom and used it to reach more common ground. That is good for Bradley. He is keeping up well with Michael. I would say that in the arena of this, Michael is struggling to surpass Bradley's defense because while Michael has read more books and perhaps has read more fancy definitions, Bradley has lived a life in the world of full experience with a mind that takes in everything. And his advantage is that the words he has access to must be used to explain everything he knows. And when one is limited in words, one would choose the best words if one is sufficiently challenged to reach them, wouldn't they? That gives Bradley quite the advantage in conciseness. Perhaps Michael is struggling to keep up. Or is he holding back, showing a lack of respect for Bradley's capacity as a fighter? Michael, are you looking down on your opponent and showing mercy? Mercy which will make your teammate weaker over time. I hope not. I hope you're being challenged, as am I. And Michael says, Bradley says, it's not about the power level though. This is purely good or bad. Let's change what makes a bad question. Yes, Bradley now wants to explore the other side of the spectrum, a wise thing to do. When you have a point and you determine a counterpoint, then you make a line. And when you have a line, you have an extra dimension that you can rise into to see what connects them. And when you can see what connects them, you can often see that they move in pairs, perfectly joined with one another. Bradley, what a good argument. And Michael says, all right, using your qualities, perhaps a bad one is one that's too vague or ambitious. Perhaps one that is dishonest, which we mentioned already. And Bradley says, can we both agree that we don't need to define good or bad as words? And Michael says, I consider them relative. So Michael does not agree that we don't need to define them as good or bad. He offers a counter definition. What will Bradley do with that? Will he accept Michael's alteration to reality as it is given to him? Or will he seek to refine it as well? And I can tell you from personal experience with Bradley, who is currently the editor of my philosophy book, that he never runs out of ways to make an argument more simple, more cutting, and more concise. You're going to have to do better than that, Michael. And look how Bradley twists this to his advantage. He says we can work with that. If a question is vague, the person can use it in more situations, so it would be good. Bradley takes Michael's request for an adjective, ignores it, and moves on, presenting an alternate reality of his own, which seems to be far more useful than the one Michael was presenting. Michael will have no choice but to accept this. Watch what he does. That's my prediction. He has to save face. Yes, Philip says it is brilliant. Philip weighing in from the peanut gallery. Our fighters are watching. He can't help but be caught up in the spirit of competition. Nor can I. Both of them are typing furiously right now. And Michael, yes, he must succeed. He must succeed in defending himself by admitting that which is obvious. Michael says, indeed, depending on the goal of the questioner, it could be an advantage or a disadvantage. And Bradley follows up. If it's misunderstood, then it didn't serve a purpose. So it's as if to say, thank you, Michael, for finally joining the conversation. I'm going to keep going. I can see you from here. You'll have to run a little bit to catch up. Yes, Bradley is moving forward heedlessly. My goodness, there are 13 minutes left. Michael, you need to pick up the pace. Change your strategy. You need to find a way to accelerate beyond Bradley and make him be the one who is at the limits of his talent. Right now, he is surpassing the limits of yours. Bradley, keep going. Don't stop. What you're doing is a foreign martial art to him. The translation is difficult. He needs to learn to do better if he's going to use his best tools. Attacking a weakness is a means of victory in this league if one is weak in their simplicity. It will hold them back in the world of persuasive argument. One must be able to talk with anyone on any topic if one is to be effective. And Michael says, let's build on your last point. And he questions it. Could an intentionally vague question designed to be misunderstood to cause inaccurate or misleading answers? That's an interesting question, and I would postulate the opposite. Could a misleading question be designed to be misunderstood to cause an accurate but misleading from the other person's perspective answer? Could you have someone backwards blindly walk into the truth when they had not intended to, because you care for them so much to learn their language, to know that to go the direction they're trying to go, one must point them in the opposite direction and tell them to go towards you, knowing that they will stumble back blindly and instinctively answering a fight or flight reflex? Yes, Michael, what about that? And he says, can the purpose of a question actually create misunderstanding? And Bradley says, if a question is designed to be a specific way, it will serve its purpose. Yes, Bradley sees the spectrum and rises above it. He says a question can be like a machine. And if the machine is designed to build, if the machine is designed and built to do what it will do, then it does not matter what the machine is built to do. It will function as intended. And Michael says, can a questioner use a good question to cause misinformation? And if so, would that be good for them? Michael is really digging into this one point. He wishes to be validated. That is the third time he has mentioned intentionally misleading. I know from my conversations outside with Michael that he views intentionally misleading information, specifically in the world of politics, to be a source of great evil in this world. And I would say that I agree. Anytime intentionally misleading information is put out into the world to get a desired effect from someone who has malevolent or at least uninformed motivations beyond their own personal self-satisfaction, that is not a good thing for anyone involved except the one. And the cost is too high. Bradley says, if it causes that misinformation, it's successfully done its purpose. One can specifically design misinformation and carry it out. That does not tie an implicit morality to it. Bradley says it is the intention behind the misleading question that determines the morality. And Michael is only focused on one end of that spectrum. He seems to be a bit spun around. So Michael says, knowing that, can a poorly understood question be good for some people? That is an interesting question, Michael. That is a good question. One would have to define what is good. Good from their perspective, for their own good, good for everyone else. Those might be different things. Objectively good, that would be a tall order. The word good is a bit ambiguous, and he's put it in quotes. I don't know if that was intentional. And Bradley says, we could ask why that question would be asked. To teach, to learn. And Michael says, sure, another question to the question, but no answers. And Bradley says, the answer, good sir, is to teach or to learn. He doubles down and says, you have not proven me wrong. In fact, everything that you're doing to try and prove me wrong is teaching me something new. Bradley says that so long as I am willing to admit that I am learning in this moment, that all moments are moments of learning. But Michael is not ready to give up. He says, change in tactics. Okay, can an intentionally misleading person use a question not to teach or to learn, but to cause deception and confusion? Yes. And is that a question anymore, or is that something else disguised as a question? What will Bradley say? Bradley says, a question to cause harm. Am I understanding? Tonight's drink of water is brought to you by this canister of tennis balls that I am using. Recycle, or don't. You decide. 8 minutes remain in this contest. Michael appears to be typing. Bradley is waiting for Michael to fill in the gaps. It seems that both of them have reached the limits of their current understanding. With 8 minutes left, that is a lot of time for them to see who can move this in a different direction. Both of them have had moments of shining brilliance, and both of them have had moments where they've struggled to keep up with the other. Who is ahead of who? I would say it is very close. which is something that is very impressive from our first-timer Bradley, who is fighting a 3-match veteran in Michael. And Michael says, yes, a question designed to cause a contradiction or expose a flaw is understanding and provokes a bad or poor answer. No knowledge is gained or taught, and is in fact bad information can result. Michael says, would that be good to the questioner, if that was his or her intent? Michael seems very hung up on this. What is his goal? And Bradley says, it would be good because it serves the purpose of misinformation. Meaning, if the machine is built to do misinformation, and the machine creates misinformation, the machine has done what it was designed to do, and therefore must be measured as good because it is a successful outcome. So Bradley says good is measured as the outcome which is predicted. And Michael, with the angry face, is the angry face Michael's? No, the angry face, wait, who's the angry face? The angry face is Philip. Philip, you fooled me. Michael says, yes, I agree. And is misinformation one of the 2 qualities you listed at the beginning? Yes, what does one learn from misinformation? Who is taught poorly when misinformation is used? And Bradley says, the first 2 that they agreed upon was that it serves a purpose and it's understood. So yes, those were terms that Michael had agreed to. Yes, he agreed to them with other things, but they were included in their original set of positions. And Michael says a good question is both. And Bradley says, if I'm understanding his position properly, that it's serving its purpose, which is misinformation. And if it's understood by correctly misinforming someone, then it is a good question and has served its purpose. That's brilliant. Bradley, you're doing well. Don't stop. I'm seeing a difference in stamina. Michael's experience is showing through. I've seen the typing slow down on Bradley's end a little bit. Bradley, dig deep. There's only 5 minutes left. You can do this. Don't stop. You're doing quite well. And Bradley says, in response to Michael's query, or it has enough of one to fulfill the other. That is interesting. So he says that purpose and understanding perhaps exist in a relationship with each other, some sort of dichotomy. And Michael says that sounds like a bit of a contradiction. He's found the same thing that I have. Are you suggesting that a question can serve enough purpose? It doesn't need to be understood to be good. And Bradley says thinking of purpose and understanding as 2 separate things is the problem. One needs to view them as scales of the other, and a balance of each is a good thing. You can have magnitudes of each in either direction, but one can be so properly balanced in one direction that it goes in a direction that might eventually be useful. 2 sets of information, 2 different conclusions. What will they say to each other? Both of them are typing. Michael is struggling to understand Bradley's position, but he's asked a good question which Bradley intends to answer. Bradley says, if it's understood and makes them think hard enough. Often I tell Tom where his quotes could be less understood to make them think. Yes, he does. My quotes often do not start as the clean and elegant things that they are. That is a skill I have been crafting over a series of weeks and months with the aid of Bradley. Yes, Bradley's ability to reduce complex ideas to the simplistic is one I have taken advantage of time and time again because his natural abilities far exceed my own, and he is willing to share with me this. I would be a fool not to take advantage of it. And Michael says that makes sense. Sometimes ambiguity can provoke deeper thoughts. Yes, he is now seeing the spectrum where the potential for good and the potential for evil exist in a relationship with each other. So yes, Michael, everything that you believe to be true about the possible use and abuse of a question to cause harm in a population is also balanced by the possible use and abuse of a question to cause good in a population. And Bradley says that's the damn point. A question can be good without intentions, but they have to serve their purpose. And Michael says, I personally think a question is just a question, neither good or bad without intentions behind it. Ah, yes, the intent drives the purpose. Yes, Michael and Bradley arrive at common ground very quickly with just 2.5 minutes to go. So they both agree that intent behind the question drives the purpose. That means a good question has a good intent behind it. Whether or not it is successful at carrying out that intent, you decide. But that is the purpose of the question, is to do good. Or the purpose of the question may be to mislead. Then the question could be successful at misleading if that's what it was designed to do. It is the intent behind it. And Bradley says, if it's neither good or bad, we're back at the beginning. Bradley says that just because we have learned much and found we've traveled in a circle, that we have learned nothing. I don't think that's what he's saying. That's a straw man argument, Bradley. Never once have I heard you say that a walk around the block does not give you a view of the block, and Michael agrees. He says, not at all. We've explored this quite a bit. There's 90 seconds yet. Stop patting yourselves on the back. You're wasting time. There's 90 seconds left. There's one more good idea in either of you. I will not have this sandbagging on this stage. Both of you need to dig deep and start typing into your keyboards immediately. 1 minute and 20 seconds remain, and I want something more. You're at the edges of what I understand, and I want to hear something new. Both of you may have taught each other, but you have not taught me sufficiently. I am not satisfied. Our audience deserves better. Type faster. There's 1 minute remaining. Who will give us the best piece of information? Who will take this conversation in a direction it hasn't gone before? That is what I want to know. That is why I do this. That is why I come here. That is why you should come and watch this with me. And Michael says, with 47 seconds left, a question is framed on intent. You can ask a good question in a good or bad form based on your defined qualities with the right intent. Yes, Michael says that if you are not good at asking questions, it does not matter how good your question is. If it is not understood, which is what Bradley said in the beginning, and based on your defined qualities with the right intent. Yes, so you pick what you're going to do and give it good or evil. There's 19 seconds left. Bradley's been typing for a while. Will he get his final point in? How many times has a match ended with one person not quite meeting the buzzer? There's 10 seconds left. Yes, how many times have we seen it? The last point goes unread because too much time was in. Hit enter now. You're out of time. 2, 1, and both of them come in. At the last minute, as the timer goes down, yes, both of them finally come in, not having their final remarks cut off. And Michael says, so you are right. You just missed intent. It makes your definition work. And Bradley says, as his closing argument, nope, good game. Meaning Bradley has recognized that he had reached the limits of himself, and rather than push in a direction he was not sure of, or even aware of, he instead chooses to take the opportunity to extend a moment of empathy to his competitor, Michael, who fought a good match. And now I am left with the impossible task of scoring such a thing. The first metric of victory. How well do they understand their own position by explaining it clearly? If I had to pick one or the other, I would say Bradley takes that point. How well do they understand the position of their opponent while their opponent is being clear? To that metric I give Michael. How much do their own egos stop them from trying to find a better answer? And the winner, by split decision, in the match between Miggity Mike and the Black Sheet, the Reluctant Sage, is Bradley. Goodbye.